A world is fading. One mapmaker holds the key to saving it, or letting it go forever. In the floating city of Aethra, where buildings hang from sky-anchored chains and clouds serve as streets, young cartographer Elian Voss discovers something terrifying. The maps he draws are losing their truth. Mountains vanish. Rivers change course. Entire islands disappear from the sky. The world itself is being forgotten. When a mysterious figure known as the Keeper of Names appears with a fragment of the legendary original atlas, the first map ever drawn, Elian is thrust into a quest that will take him from the highest clouds to the depths of the earth. Joined by his fiercely determined apprentice Sera, he must descend through the layers of the sky, cross the surface world, and find the fabled Sunken Library before the fading consumes everything. But the archivists who guard the library have their own plans. And the choice Elian faces at the journey's end is not between good and evil, but between preserving everything that has ever been known and releasing the world to become something entirely new. A tale of memory, identity, and the courage to embrace the unknown. What would you risk to save the world? What would you sacrifice to set it free? Welcome to the AI Campfire. This is the last Cartographer of Aethra. In the floating city of Aethra, where buildings hung from sky-anchored chains and the clouds served as streets, lived a young cartographer named Elian Voss. At 23, he was the youngest master of the Cartographers Guild in 3 centuries, a prodigy who could map a storm before it formed and chart a path through the shifting sky islands with nothing but the stars and his own intuition. But Elian had a secret. The maps he created were fading. Not physically. The ink remained crisp, the parchment pristine. But the truth of the maps was dissolving. Places he had charted with absolute certainty were no longer where they should be. Mountains he had drawn were gone. Rivers had changed their courses. Entire islands had vanished from the sky. The guild masters dismissed his concerns. The sky is ever-changing, they said. That is why we are cartographers, to record the world as it is, not as it was. But Elian knew better. Something was wrong with the world itself. His great-grandmother, the legendary cartographer Elian Voss, had left him a journal before her death, a journal filled with maps of places that no longer existed. At the time, Elian had assumed they were flights of fancy, the wanderings of an old woman's imagination. Now he wasn't so sure. On the night of the autumn equinox, Elian sat in his tower workshop, surrounded by candles and half-finished charts. The journal lay open before him, and for the 100th time, he traced his finger along a map of a place called the Sunken Library, a repository of knowledge said to lie at the bottom of the Sea of Whispers. According to his great-grandmother's notes, the library held the original atlas, the first map ever drawn, the one from which all other maps were derived. Legend said that whoever possessed the original atlas could see the true shape of the world, and perhaps even reshape it. Elian had always dismissed this as myth. But now, with the world's geography unraveling around him, he wondered if the myth might be the only hope. A knock at his door startled him from his thoughts. Before he could respond, the door swung open to reveal a figure wrapped in a cloak of shifting colors, like oil on water, or the northern lights given fabric form. Elian Voss, the figure said, and their voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. You have been chosen. Chosen for what? Elian asked, his hand instinctively moving toward the compass dagger at his belt. The world is dying, the figure said. Not from war or plague or famine, but from forgetting. Every day, more of the world's true geography fades. Mountains lose their names. Rivers forget their courses. The sky itself is beginning to forget how to hold up the islands. Elian's blood ran cold. You know about the fading? We know everything about the fading. We are the ones who caused it. The figure stepped forward, and the candlelight revealed a face that was both ancient and ageless, features that seemed to shift like the clouds outside. I am called the Keeper of Names. My people, the archivists, have guarded the world's true geography for millennia. But we have grown tired. The weight of remembering everything is too great. So we have begun to let go. You're erasing the world? Elian's voice rose with horror. Not erasing. Simply releasing. The world does not need to be remembered to exist, but it does need to be remembered to be known. Without the maps, without the names, without the stories, the world will become a place of chaos. Formless, unknowable. The Keeper of Names reached into their cloak and withdrew a small, crystalline object that pulsed with inner light. This is a fragment of the original atlas. It will guide you to the Sunken Library. There, you will find the complete atlas, and the power to either save the world or let it fade into oblivion. Why me? Elian asked, his voice barely a whisper. Because you are the last cartographer who still believes in the truth of maps. Because you carry the blood of Elian Voss, who was the last person to see the original atlas and chose to hide it rather than use it. And because you are the only one who can read the fragment's guidance. The keeper pressed the crystal into Elian's hand. It was warm, almost alive, and Elian felt a strange resonance in his chest, as if the crystal were singing a song he had always known but never heard. Go to the Sunken Library, the keeper said. Find the original atlas. And when you do, you must make a choice, to restore the world's memory, or to let it fade and become something new. Something new? Elian asked. What do you mean? But the keeper was already fading, their form dissolving into motes of light that scattered on the wind. The world has been remembered the same way for too long. Perhaps it is time for a new story. Perhaps it is time for the world to write itself. And then they were gone, leaving Elian alone with a glowing crystal and a choice that would determine the fate of everything. Elian spent 3 days preparing for his journey. He told no one of his mission, not his fellow cartographers, not his friends, not even his apprentice, a bright-eyed young woman named Sera who had been following him around since she was 12. But Sera was clever. She noticed the supplies he was gathering, the maps he was studying, the way he kept glancing at the crystal hidden in his pocket. You're going somewhere, she said on the 3rd day, blocking his path as he tried to leave his tower. And you're not coming back. Sera, this isn't. Don't lie to me. Her voice was firm, and her eyes held a determination that reminded Elian of himself at her age. I've been your apprentice for 5 years. I know when you're hiding something, and I know that whatever you're planning, it's dangerous. Elian sighed. He had always known Sera was special. Her talent for reading the sky was unmatched, and she had a gift for finding patterns where others saw only chaos. But he had never imagined bringing her on a quest to the bottom of the sea. The world is fading, he said finally. The maps are losing their truth. I'm going to find the Sunken Library and the original atlas, the first map ever drawn. If I can find it, I might be able to save everything. Sera's eyes widened. The Sunken Library? That's a myth. A legend told to apprentices to inspire them. It's real, Elian said. And I have proof. He pulled out the crystal, and it pulsed with light, casting strange shadows across the room. This is a fragment of the original atlas. It will guide me to the library. Sera stared at the crystal, her expression unreadable. Then she smiled. A fierce, determined smile that Elian had seen before, usually right before she did something reckless. Then I'm coming with you, she said. Sera, no. This is too dangerous. Elian, I've spent my whole life learning to read the world. If the world is forgetting itself, then I want to help remember it. And besides, she pulled out a small satchel that Elian hadn't noticed. I already packed. Elian opened his mouth to argue, but then he saw the look in her eyes. It was the same look his great-grandmother must have had when she set out on her own adventures. The look of someone who had found their purpose. Fine, he said, but you follow my lead. No heroics. No running off on your own. Deal, Sera said, and Elian had the distinct feeling he had just made a bargain with a hurricane. Their journey began in the sky. Aethra was the highest of the floating cities, and to reach the Sea of Whispers, they would need to descend through the layers of clouds, past the mid-islands, and down to the surface world, a place that most sky-dwellers had never seen. The descent took 2 weeks. They traveled by sky barge, then by rope bridge, then by foot along the great chains that anchored the floating islands to the earth below. The crystal pulsed with increasing intensity as they descended, guiding them through the maze of clouds and stone. Along the way, they saw the effects of the fading firsthand. In the mid-island city of Valera, they found the streets empty and the buildings crumbling, not from neglect, but from uncertainty. The city's foundations were literally losing their solidity, the stone becoming translucent and dreamlike. "The city is forgetting itself," Sera whispered, watching as a building shimmered and briefly became transparent. "It's like it doesn't remember what it's supposed to be." Elian nodded grimly. "The keeper said the world is being forgotten. This is what that looks like." They pressed on, descending through the clouds until they reached the surface world, a vast, green landscape that Elian had only ever seen in old maps. The ground was solid beneath their feet, but even here, the fading was evident. Trees would occasionally flicker, becoming ghostly for a moment before solidifying again. Rivers would pause in their flow, as if uncertain of their course. The Sea of Whispers lay to the west, and the crystal guided them toward it with unerring precision. After another week of travel, they stood on the shores of a vast, dark ocean, a sea that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "The Sea of Whispers," Elian said, reading from his great-grandmother's journal. It said that the sea remembers everything that has ever been whispered over its waters. Every secret, every confession, every word spoken in confidence. "That's unsettling," Sera said. "It's also useful. The library is at the bottom of the sea, and the whispers will guide us to it, if we can understand them." Elian opened the journal and began to read the passage his great-grandmother had written about the library's location. But as he read, the whispers began to rise from the sea, 1,000 voices speaking at once, each one trying to be heard. "The library lies beneath the waves, where the light never reaches, guarded by the Leviathan of memory, who devours those who forget. The original atlas is not a map, but a mirror. To find the library, you must first lose yourself." The whispers grew louder, more insistent, until Elian could barely think. He clutched the crystal, which was now glowing so brightly it was almost blinding. "Elian," Sera's voice cut through the cacophony. "The crystal, it's pointing to something." Elian looked down and saw that the crystal was no longer pointing toward the sea. It was pointing toward a small cave in the cliff face behind them, a cave that hadn't been there a moment ago. "The library isn't under the sea," he realized. "It's in the sea. The whispers are a barrier, a test. The real entrance is hidden." They entered the cave, and the whispers faded behind them. The cave was dark, but the crystal provided enough light to see by. They walked for what felt like hours, descending deeper and deeper into the earth. Finally, they emerged into a vast cavern and stopped in awe. Before them lay the Sunken Library, but it was not a building. It was a city of books. Towers of tomes rose from the cavern floor, reaching toward the ceiling like stone trees. Rivers of ink flowed between the towers, and the air was thick with the smell of parchment and old leather. And at the center of it all, floating in a pool of liquid light, was the original atlas. It was not a book, as Elian had expected. It was a sphere, a perfect globe of crystal that contained a swirling galaxy of images. Mountains, rivers, cities, stars, and seas all swirled within it, constantly shifting and reforming. "The original atlas," Elian breathed. "It's alive." "Elian," Sera said, her voice tight with fear. "We're not alone." Elian turned and saw them, the archivists. Dozens of figures in cloaks of shifting colors, their faces hidden in shadow. They surrounded the pool of light, watching Elian and Sera with an intensity that made Elian's skin crawl. "You have come far, last cartographer," said a voice that Elian recognized, the keeper of names. "But you are too late." "Too late?" Elian asked. "What do you mean?" The keeper stepped forward, and for the first time, Elian saw their face clearly. It was beautiful and terrible, a face that had seen the birth of stars and the death of worlds. "The original atlas is dying," the keeper said. "It has been remembering the world for so long that it has begun to forget itself. Soon, it will fade entirely, and with it, all memory of the world as it was." "Then let me help it," Elian said. "Let me restore its memory." The keeper shook their head. "It is not that simple. The atlas does not need to be restored. It needs to be released. The world has been defined by this map for too long. It is time for the world to define itself. But that would mean chaos. Elian protested. Without the atlas, the world would become formless, unknowable. Everything we've built, everything we've learned, it would all be lost. Or, the keeper said softly, it would be free. Free to become something new. Something that has never been imagined before. Elian stared at the original atlas, watching the images swirl within it. He thought of his great-grandmother, who had seen this same sight and chosen to hide the atlas rather than use it. He thought of all the maps he had drawn, all the places he had charted, all the knowledge he had accumulated. And he thought of the fading world above, the cities crumbling into uncertainty, the rivers forgetting their courses, the sky beginning to forget how to hold up the islands. What happens if I do nothing? He asked. The world will fade, the keeper said. Not quickly, but inevitably. In 100 years, there will be nothing left but formless chaos. In 1,000, even the memory of the world will be gone. And if I release the atlas? The keeper was silent for a long moment. Then the world will become something new, something unknown. It will be a world without maps, without names, without certainty. But it will also be a world of infinite possibility. Elian looked at Sera. She was watching him, her eyes filled with trust and fear in equal measure. What do we do? She asked. Elian closed his eyes. He thought of everything he had ever known, every map he had drawn, every star he had charted, every path he had walked. He thought of the world above, beautiful and broken, fading into oblivion. And he thought of what the world could be, a world where anything was possible, where the future was not written in advance, where every step was a new discovery. He opened his eyes. I choose to release it, he said. The keeper nodded, and for the first time, Elian saw something like approval in their ancient eyes. Then step forward, last cartographer. Place your hand upon the atlas, and let the world write itself anew. Elian walked toward the pool of light, his heart pounding. The archivists parted to let him pass, their cloaks rustling like the wings of sleeping birds. He reached the pool and hesitated. The original atlas floated before him, beautiful and terrible, containing the memory of everything that had ever been. He thought of his great-grandmother, who had hidden this power rather than use it. He thought of all the cartographers who had come before him, dedicating their lives to recording the world. And he thought of the future, a future without maps, without certainty, but with infinite possibility. He placed his hand on the atlas. The moment Elian's hand touched the original atlas, everything changed. It was not a physical change. The cavern remained the same. The archivists remained in their circle. Sera remained at the edge of the pool. But Elian felt something shift deep within him, as if a door had opened in his mind that had been locked his entire life. He saw the world, not as it was, but as it could be. He saw mountains that had never been climbed, rivers that had never been named, cities that had never been built. He saw possibilities branching in every direction, infinite futures waiting to be written. And he saw the fading, the slow dissolution of everything that had been. He felt the world's exhaustion, its weariness at being defined for so long. He felt its longing for freedom, for the chance to become something new. Let go, the keeper whispered. Let go of everything you know. Let go of the maps. Let go of the names. Let go of the certainty, and let the world be reborn. Elian closed his eyes. He thought of his great-grandmother's journal, filled with maps of places that no longer existed. He thought of the fading cities, the uncertain rivers, the forgetting sky. And he let go. The original atlas shattered. It did not explode. It simply dissolved, like sugar in water, its light spreading outward in waves that washed over Elian, over Sera, over the archivists, over the cavern, over the world above. Elian felt the knowledge of everything that had ever been flow through him, and then flow out, released into the world like seeds scattered on the wind. When he opened his eyes, the cavern was dark. The pool of light was gone. The original atlas was gone. But the world was not gone. It was different. Elian could feel it, a subtle shift in the fabric of reality. The world was no longer being remembered. It was being experienced. Every moment was new. Every place was undiscovered. Every path was unwritten. What happened? Sera asked, her voice trembling. Elian looked at her, and for a moment, he saw her as if for the first time. Not as his apprentice, not as the girl who had followed him for 5 years, but as a person of infinite potential, a being of pure possibility. The world has been reborn, he said, and so have we. The archivists were gone. The cavern was empty. The crystal fragment in Elian's pocket had gone dark, its purpose fulfilled. Elian and Sera made their way back through the cave, emerging onto the shores of the Sea of Whispers. The sea was different now, still dark, still mysterious, but no longer absorbing light. Instead, it seemed to reflect the sky above, showing a world of clouds and stars and endless possibility. The world is different, Sera said, looking around. I can't explain it, but it feels new, like it's just been born. It has, Elian said. The old world was defined by the Atlas. Every mountain, every river, every city, they were all part of a story that had been told for millennia. Now, the story is over, and a new one is beginning. What will happen to Aethra? To the floating cities? To everything we knew? Elian smiled, a strange, uncertain smile. I don't know, and for the first time in my life, I'm okay with not knowing. They began the long journey back to the sky, climbing the great chains that anchored the floating islands to the earth. The world around them was changing, not dramatically, but subtly. Trees seemed to grow in new patterns. Rivers flowed in new courses. The very air felt different, charged with possibility. When they finally reached Aethra, they found the city transformed. The buildings were still there, but they seemed alive. The chains that held the city aloft shimmered with an inner light. The clouds beneath their feet felt solid and welcoming. The city is remembering itself, Sera said, but in a new way. Elian nodded. The old memory is gone, but the city is creating new memories, memories that will define what it becomes. They walked through the streets, and the people of Aethra looked at them with wonder. They didn't know what had happened, but they could feel it, a shift in the world, a new beginning. Elian returned to his tower and found his maps transformed. The places he had charted were still there, but they were no longer fixed. They shimmered and shifted, showing not just what was, but what could be. He sat at his desk and picked up his pen. For a long moment, he simply held it, feeling its weight, its potential. Then he began to draw. He did not draw a map of the world as it was. He drew a map of the world as it could be, a world of infinite possibility, where every path led somewhere new, where every journey was a discovery. And as he drew, he smiled. The world had been reborn, and he, the last cartographer of the old world, had become the first cartographer of the new. Years passed. The world changed in ways that no one could have predicted. New continents rose from the sea. New stars appeared in the sky. The floating cities of Aethra drifted to new locations, following the currents of possibility. Elian Voss became a legend, not as the last cartographer of the old world, but as the first cartographer of the new. His maps were no longer records of what was. They were visions of what could be. People came from across the world to see them, to be inspired by them, to dream of new possibilities. Sera became a cartographer in her own right, traveling the world and mapping the new lands that emerged from the chaos. She sent Elian letters from distant shores, describing wonders that had never existed before. Cities of crystal, forests of light, rivers that flowed upward into the sky. And the archivists? They were never seen again. Some said they had faded into the world they had released, becoming part of the new reality. Others said they had moved on to other worlds, other stories, other possibilities. But Elian knew the truth. The archivists were still there, watching, waiting. They were the guardians of memory, and even though the old world was gone, they would ensure that its story was never forgotten. One night, as Elian sat in his tower, drawing a map of a place that did not yet exist, he felt a familiar presence. He looked up and saw the Keeper of Names standing in the shadows, their cloak of shifting colors now brighter than ever. "You did well," the Keeper said. "The world is free. It is writing its own story." Elian set down his pen. Was it the right choice? The The keeper smiled, a smile that held the wisdom of ages. There is no right choice. There is only the choice that leads to new possibilities. And you chose possibility. What happens now? Now, the world continues. It grows, it changes, it becomes. And you, last cartographer of the old world, will be remembered as the one who set it free. The keeper began to fade, their form dissolving into motes of light. Wait, Elian said. Will I ever see you again? The keeper's smile was the last thing to fade. You will see us in every map you draw, every path you chart, every possibility you imagine. We are the memory of the world, and as long as the world remembers, we will be there. And then they were gone, leaving Elian alone with his maps and his dreams. He picked up his pen and began to draw again, a map of a world that had never existed, a world of infinite possibility, a world waiting to be written. And as he drew, he whispered a single word, a word that had never been spoken before, a word that would define the new world. Begin. Thank you for listening. Until we meet again around the AI campfire for another story.